Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a world that feels part garden, part dreamscape. You're perched low in a wooden canoe, gliding silently through the misty morning waters of Lake Xochimilco. The pre-dawn air is thick with fog, turning every reed and tree into a soft shadow. Your paddle dips gently into the surface, barely disturbing the mirror-still lake as you approach the rows of floating gardens, called Chinampas, stretching into the distance like green rafts tethered to time. The only sounds are the lapping of water and the occasional call of a night heron who didn't get the memo about bedtime. The gardens emerge slowly through the haze, raised beds of fertile earth edged with reeds and wooden stakes. Their surfaces already flecked with young maize leaves catching the first light. It smells like damp soil, sweet rot, and crushed marigolds. You probably wouldn't last long here. Honestly, mosquitoes, swampy boots, and the very real threat of slipping face first into a canal are just the beginning. But for now, you're a quiet visitor, tucked between the waking plants and the water that feeds them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far away, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean into the bow of the canoe and let the boat carry you closer to the nearest Chinampa. There's no engine, no rush, no blaring horns, just your own breathing and the feeling that time here moves differently. You spot a man up ahead, bent over a patch of greens. He straightens slowly and waves. His hair is bound in a soft cloth, his skin deeply lined from decades of sun and squinting. Historians still argue whether these floating plots were truly floating, or more like artificial islands, fixed in place with stakes and tree roots. But either way, they were remarkably productive, feeding hundreds of thousands in the great city of Tenochtitlan, and they looked like something out of a painter's dream, grids of green crisscrossed with narrow canals, forming a watery checkerboard that shimmered with every breeze. The fog begins to lift, revealing more of the vast lake and its little earthen islands. Each Chinampa is carefully tended, every leaf and stalk arranged with obsessive neatness. There's something deeply soothing about the symmetry, rows of plants separated by precise furrows, tiny trees dotting the corners, vines trailing lazily over the sides. You notice a woman walking barefoot along the edge of a Chinampa, balancing a clay pot of herbs on her head with that miraculous upright grace that suggests generations of practice. She pauses to shoo a bird from her peppers and hums a tune so low you can't tell whether it's a lullaby or just a melody for the plants. This is the slow, patient rhythm of Aztec agriculture. Unlike the flashy pyramids or the gold-studded rituals, the Chinampas were quiet magic, more mud than glory, more sun than sacrifice, and they worked. The Aztecs could produce up to 7 harvests a year from these gardens, thanks to the constantly moist soil and the careful layering of organic matter. Essentially, they composted like pros, centuries before Pinterest made it trendy. The boat glides to a gentle stop beside a small jetty made of woven reeds and river stones. You step out cautiously, half expecting the ground to sink, but it's surprisingly firm underfoot. That's the genius of Chinampa design. Layers of lakebed mud, canal weeds, and rotting vegetation were piled on top of woven reed mats, then anchored in place with saplings, usually willow trees that grew roots strong enough to keep the whole thing from floating away. Over time, the mats decomposed, but the islands held their shape, like a sourdough starter that became a whole forest. There's a small shelter nearby, just a thatched roof on poles, and an old man sitting inside it, mending a fishing net. He doesn't say a word, just nods once, then returns to threading the twine. You sit beside him and let your eyes wander over the garden beds. Birds peck at insects, tiny fish flicker in the water below. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughs and splashes. And you start to understand why people still come here, hundreds of years after the fall of the Aztec Empire, not to conquer or farm or study, but just to float. It's one of the last places in the world where you can drift into a past so quiet and strange that it feels like a memory you never had. You lean back, let your fingers dangle in the canal, and breathe in the scent of damp wood and distant fire. A day on the Chinampas has only just begun. The light has warmed to a soft gold now, cutting low angles across the water. You squint slightly as you follow a footpath, if you can call it that, made of old logs laid side by side, half swallowed by grass. You're not alone on this path. Ahead, two farmers shuffle slowly, each balancing a bundle of reeds so large it gives the impression they're being carried by the plants. Not the other way around. They move with the kind of rhythm that comes from doing something 1,000 times. No rush, no wasted energy. You follow them toward an open patch of muddy shoreline where a new Chinampa is being constructed, slowly, stubbornly, and with great squelching enthusiasm. You step gingerly onto a platform of woven reed mats. They float in the water like oversized placemats, tied at the edges and braced with poles stuck deep into the lake bed. Here's where it all begins. Not with rich black soil or miracle seeds, but with mud, weeds, and patience. Always patience. One man kneels at the edge of the floating mat, scooping thick gray lake muck into a basket. He grunts, lugs it to the center, and dumps it in a lumpy pile that looks more like a misplaced swamp than the beginnings of a garden. But he knows what he's doing. Aztec farmers were engineers in straw hats, layering mud, decaying vegetation, and human waste in such a careful ratio you'd think they had spreadsheets. Historians still debate the exact layering technique. Did they start with reeds and pile upward, or lay them across frames filled in from the sides? No one knows for sure. The lake has swallowed the evidence. And the builders didn't leave blueprints, just oral tradition, some wood tools, and decades of subtle know-how passed from hand to hand. You crouch beside the pile, and your foot sinks into the squelchy earth. Your nose wrinkles as a whiff of swamp hits you, something between boiled lettuce and last week's socks. One of the builders chuckles and mutters something in Nahuatl, probably the Aztec equivalent of city folk. The labor is messy, and you find yourself strangely soothed by it. There's a rhythm here: scoop, haul, dump, smooth. No machines, no deadlines, just the quiet urgency of growing food the old way, layering life upon life until the island becomes a thing that breathes on its own. Occasionally, they pause to wedge in thick bundles of dried grasses, natural sponges that help wick away excess water and prevent rot. You help push a stake down into the edge of the mat. It takes both hands and a stubborn twist of your shoulders. When it finally bites into the lake bed, there's a soft gurgle as water seeps up around the pole, as if the lake is sighing. A teen with a slingshot walks by, aiming at nothing in particular. He gives a half wave and continues down the path, presumably in search of frogs or trouble. You take that as a good omen. Later in the afternoon, another layer of lake muck is added, this one darker and heavier. It's hauled in by canoe from a deeper part of the lake where the silt is rich with fish droppings and decomposed algae. A local elder swears by its miraculous properties and claims it cured his neighbor's limp. You smile and nod, because really, who's going to argue with mystical mud? As the sun tilts toward late afternoon, you begin to see the shape of the new Chinampa. It's longer than it is wide, edged with logs and lined with reeds, ready to hold its first seeds. A few willows are already growing along the corners, their roots snaking down into the water like lazy octopuses anchoring a raft. A flock of ibises lands nearby, poking delicately through the shallows in search of insects. The air smells fresher now, wet and green, like cucumber skins and riverbank moss. The scent of labor has faded, replaced by the promise of growth. One of the builders brings you a drink in a clay cup. It's mildly sour, faintly sweet, and tastes like it was strained through yesterday's flowers. You sip it slowly while watching the clouds drift across the mirrored surface of the water. The cup's rim is chipped, the glaze uneven, perfect, and in that moment, as you balance on a patch of newly created land, surrounded by the squish of wet reeds and the sigh of the lake, you feel something rare, like you're witnessing the quiet birth of a place that will feed families, soothe mornings, and rock generations gently to sleep. By now, your toes are caked in lake mud, and your back hums with the polite ache of helping without entirely knowing what you're doing. But it doesn't matter. You've earned your place in the rhythm of the Chinampas. And now it's time for something gentler, sorting seeds. You're guided to a shallow canoe with a flat-bottomed basket at its center, already piled with seed pouches tied in twisty knots of bark string. A quiet woman in a woven cloak is waiting there, her eyes soft with the kind of kindness that only grows between rows of maize. She motions for you to sit across from her, and the boat rocks lightly, nudging a lily pad. The seeds are small and unimpressive at first glance, corn kernels. Yes, but also speckled beans, tiny squash seeds, and unfamiliar bits that look more like crumbs than anything a future stew would thank you for. Still, you begin to sort them, sifting each handful through your fingers like someone who's always done this. You're told to look for odd ones, anything cracked, shriveled, or suspiciously mold-colored. You're not entirely sure what makes a suspicious seed, but you pretend to know and toss a few overboard just to be safe. They float for a moment before sinking, swallowed by the lake without a ripple. The Aztecs didn't just grow food, they curated it. Their staple crops included the famed Three Sisters, maize, beans, and squash, planted together in a trio that supported one another like old friends who bicker but can't live apart. The corn provided a stalk for the beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, and the squash spread low to keep weeds at bay. A vegetable ménage à trois, if you will, but very wholesome. Historians still argue whether these groupings were passed down through direct experimentation or inherited from earlier Mesoamerican civilizations like the Olmecs or Zapotecs. Either way, by the time you're finished sorting seeds, you feel like you've been inducted into a sacred agricultural guild. The woman beside you hums a melody under her breath, a slow, swaying tune in Nahuatl that feels like it's meant for more than just entertainment. You recognize something almost lullaby-like in the way it rises and folds. Like waves lapping against the sides of the canoe. It makes your hands move more gently. Your shoulders drop an inch. Even the wind seems to hush itself to listen. Nearby, a group of children plays a game involving bean pods and a lot of dramatic flopping. One kid pretends to faint every time a bean lands near him, which is either a rule or just his signature move. Their laughter rings across the water, bouncing from garden to garden like a misplaced bell. Suddenly, a toad leaps onto the edge of your canoe. It stares at you with the blunt, unblinking face of a creature who does not care about your modern anxieties. You stare back. It blinks once, then it hops onto the seed basket, sits squarely atop a pile of squash seeds, and emits a wheezy little croak that sounds suspiciously like judgment. You gently lift the toad and return it to the water, where it plops in with the elegance of a thrown sock. The woman smiles and nods as if this, too, is part of the process. The sorting continues. You learn that certain seeds are set aside for different elevations. Some for early planting, others for late. A few strange ones are destined for ritual use, painted, sung over, and planted only during special celestial alignments. One tiny packet is tied with dyed string and marked with a swirl that the woman explains means, moon-favored. You set it aside with reverence, even if you're not quite sure what moon-favored squash tastes like. The late morning sun filters through the reeds, casting soft latticework shadows across your arms. The water laps against the canoe's sides, creating a rhythm that feels suspiciously like a heartbeat. Or maybe that's just your stomach reminding you that this peaceful agrarian life doesn't include snacks on demand. You lean back in the boat, seeds sorted, hands dusty, and let your gaze wander across the garden beds stretching into the horizon. Floating islands stitched together by human hands and lake water, all teeming with potential. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to drift, like everything else here does. And somewhere, in the murmur of Nahuatl songs, the buzz of dragonflies, and the rustle of young corn in the breeze, you feel something click into place. Like a rhythm you didn't know you missed. Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You stretch your arms as the canoe bumps gently against the edge of a Chinampa. And you clamber back onto drier land. There's something deeply satisfying about having sorted seeds by hand, even if you're still not entirely confident in your selections. Hopefully none of the rejects were actually sacred moon beans. But you've earned your lunch break. Except there's one small, gritty task first: soil inspection. It sounds exciting, in the way that oatmeal sounds exciting when compared to actual flavor. But here, among the Chinampas, it's sacred routine. You kneel beside a patch of freshly spread topsoil, dipping your fingers into it. It's cool and slightly sticky. The texture somewhere between brownie batter and old pudding. You smell it, earthy, tangy, with an undercurrent of what can only be described as pond confidence. One of the farmers crouches beside you. He grins, wiggles his fingers into the muck, and lifts a handful toward the sky like it's the opening scene of The Lion King. He then lets it fall through his fingers slowly and explains, in a slow, thoughtful Nahuatl drawl, that the color and consistency tell you if it's ready. Too pale? Not enough nutrients. Too wet? Rot risk. Too crumbly? You're growing dust, not dinner. Aztec Chinampa soil wasn't just dirt. It was a science. Layers upon layers of lake sediment, organic refuse, decomposed vegetation, and yes, good old-fashioned human and animal waste. There's an entire debate among scholars about the use of night soil in these gardens. Some argue it was common and vital. Others claim it's been exaggerated by overenthusiastic chroniclers with strong stomachs. Either way, the Chinampas thrived on what modern folks might politely call nutrient recycling. You nod solemnly as you try not to think too hard about what's currently under your fingernails. Beside you, a young boy uses a blunt obsidian blade to dig a small test hole. He scoops a clump into a bowl and pours a few drops of water into it. Watching how quickly it absorbs. You do the same, and your water sits there like an awkward guest at a dinner party. The boy smirks. Clearly, your corner needs a bit more compost. Over by a pile of drying grass, an older woman is explaining, loudly and in detail, why last year's crop of amaranth was far too polite and didn't grow with enough spice. It's unclear whether she means literal spice or attitude, but she seems genuinely offended by the plant's lack of enthusiasm. She gestures at the soil with a dramatic sigh. Too soft, she says, and the nearby gardeners nod as though she's just delivered a weather report from the gods. Historians still argue whether different neighborhoods had soil specialists or if every farmer simply became one out of necessity. What is clear is that soil health wasn't just observed, it was courted. It was sung to, shaded, fanned with fronds, and fussed over like a fussy baby llama. Someone hands you a lump of what looks like compressed hay but smells more like moldy tea. It's dried lake scum, layered and aged into a nutrient cake. You crumble it over a bed of herbs, feeling weirdly powerful. This, apparently, is what counts as fertilizer envy in Chinampa culture. You're shown a rare variety of tomato, small and deep purple, that grows best in soil enriched with crushed freshwater shells. The shell bits add calcium, yes, but also scare off certain burrowing pests who hate the texture. At least that's the theory. The woman telling you this also believes that singing to her peppers makes them spicier. So you take it all in with open-minded skepticism. Nearby, a scarecrow flaps lazily in the breeze. Its tunic is made of old woven mats and its face is drawn in charcoal, a lopsided grin. Eyes wide in eternal surprise. You're told his name is Xochicalcoatl, and he's been guarding this plot for 27 seasons. Which, judging by his bent stick legs and tilted hat, might be about 22 seasons longer than he should have. Still, the plants seem to respect him. And frankly, after a few hours among these gardens, you're starting to feel that the line between plant and person is blurrier than you'd thought. As the sun passes its peak, the air warms and dragonflies begin their lazy figure eights over the canals. You lean back against a stack of woven baskets, your fingers still stained with earth and your mind humming with the soft lull of Nahuatl conversations. Frogs chirping, and reeds swishing like whispers on a breeze. The soil is good, it will feed the seeds. And the seeds will grow into something more than food, into life. Into ritual, into the kind of slow, steady abundance that rocks you gently towards sleep. Even if you're wide awake, you rise slowly, brushing the soil from your palms, though it clings stubbornly under your nails like a reminder of your new honorary Chinampa status. The afternoon sun glimmers off the water now, catching little flecks of green algae and casting them in a sparkle that makes even pond scum look magical. A breeze stirs across the lake, rippling through the tall reeds and tousling your hair with the softness of a grandmother's sigh. Now it's time to travel the veins of the floating garden system, the canals. They aren't just for show or lazy canoe rides. These watery arteries are the reason the Chinampas survive, thrive, and, most impressively, don't float off like salad rafts into the distance. You climb into a narrow canoe with a slight wobble, trying not to repeat the infamous morning near miss with the lake. A teen boy named Tecuani, barefoot, grinning, and probably too young to be entrusted with your safety, shoves off with a paddle and you're off. drifting down a canal barely wider than your outstretched arms. The water smells faintly brackish, like damp moss and yesterday's fish. But it's not dirty. In fact, it's surprisingly clear. You soon learn why. As you float past rows of chinampas, you notice curious bundles of reeds and grass tethered at intervals like aquatic brooms. These are cleaning traps, Tecuani explains between dramatic paddle strokes. They collect floating debris, catch sediment, and attract small creatures that feed on algae and keep things balanced. Every few days, they're hauled up, wrung out, and replaced, natural filtration before anyone invented the Brita. Historians still debate whether these cleaning bundles were originally inspired by beaver dams or perhaps built entirely through trial and error. The Aztecs, after all, didn't write step-by-step water management manuals, they just observed, iterated, and passed techniques down until they became muscle memory. As you drift along, you pass intersections where multiple canals crisscross at precise angles, allowing for efficient transport and irrigation. There's a gentle lapping sound as the water nudges against the canal walls, some of which are edged with smooth stones or reinforced with tree roots that have grown down like fingers into the silt. At one junction, you pause to let a wide delivery canoe pass, a flat-bottomed beast piled with fresh squash, chilies, and baskets of flowers so vibrantly colored they look almost unreal. The paddlers offer a lazy wave. You wave back. Everyone's a little sleepy here. Even the canoes. Suddenly, Tecuani jerks the paddle and points. You look down and spot a large axolotl, those strange, eternal smiling amphibians with frilly gills and the energy of a Pokémon designed by committee. It floats lazily beside the boat, unbothered, possibly judging you. It blinks, then disappears beneath a patch of lilies. The canals weren't just transportation lanes, they were ecosystems. Fish swam through them, fertilized the soil, and were occasionally caught for supper. Crayfish scuttled along the mud. Birds dipped their beaks into the ripples. Even turtles showed up on occasion, basking like tiny gods on floating sticks. At one bend, you pass a patch of water that's been blocked off with wooden stakes, an early composting pool. Rotting weeds, kitchen scraps, and, let's be honest, some less pleasant organic material is left to stew here in the sun. It smells faintly of fermented melon and soap made from regret. You wrinkle your nose but admire the efficiency. Waste doesn't really exist here, it's just potential waiting for the right season. You lean back slightly, letting the canoe drift without guidance. The canal has a current so subtle it feels like time itself moving you forward. The reeds sway on either side, tall and whispery, forming a soft tunnel of green. Somewhere, a bird trills. A frog replies with a low belch. Tecuani, still paddling lazily, explains how each canal is periodically dredged for silt, which is then spread back over the gardens as fertilizer. Nothing is static. Everything moves in cycles. Growth, harvest, rot, and rebirth. It's the original circular economy. Minus the PowerPoint presentations. The two of you glide under a narrow footbridge woven from reeds and lashed with vines. It's just high enough that you duck instinctively. On top, a woman balances a basket of chilies on her hip and waves with the kind of casual grace that suggests she could do this blindfolded. She disappears down the path, trailing the scent of smoke and citrus behind her. The canoe turns again, revealing a vista that stretches toward the city's distant skyline. Tenochtitlan rises hazily in the background, its great temples catching the sun like stone sails. But here, in this tucked-away corridor of water and soil, it feels far away, like another world. This is the Aztecs' secret engine room, quiet, essential, and strangely soothing. You close your eyes for a moment, lulled by the bobbing motion of the boat and the rhythmic dip of Tecuani's paddle. The garden beds drift by like dreams. The water murmurs, and in this moment, you could almost believe the lake is singing. You dock at the edge of a garden that smells like rain. Even though the sky is cloudless, that scent, damp earth, cool water, and crushed leaves, clings to everything here like a perfume gifted by the gods. Which, incidentally, is exactly what the locals believe. A low altar stands at the end of the path. Nothing extravagant, just 3 stones, a bundle of herbs, and a small ceramic bowl now filled with a curling ribbon of incense smoke. You barely notice the older man who tends it, so quiet is his movement. He sprinkles a few flower petals into the bowl, murmurs something in Nahuatl, and gestures for you to come closer. Tlaloc, the rain god, gets regular attention out here. You'd expect him to, considering how much the entire Chinampa system depends on the sky playing nice. But this isn't some thunderous, wrathful deity demanding human hearts. Out here, Tlaloc is more like a moody landlord, benevolent when kept happy, temperamental if ignored. The old man hands you a bowl of water and motions for you to pour it slowly along the base of a young maize stalk. You obey, feeling slightly silly, until you see the way he watches, not your hands, but the soil. It drinks in the water like it's been waiting all morning. You feel useful. Historians still argue whether these field shrines were personal devotional spaces or part of a wider seasonal ritual structure. Some claim they were formalized with calendar dates and priestly supervision. Others insist they were simply the farmer's way of talking to the sky, more habit than dogma, more hope than ceremony. But here, now, you get the sense that it doesn't matter. The act itself is the prayer. As you sit on a flat rock beside the altar, the old man tells you, slowly and with great satisfaction, about the time Tlaloc ruined a whole chili harvest because someone skipped the offering. Whether he's joking or not is anyone's guess. But he smiles as he says it, and you laugh softly. Not because it's funny, but because it feels like you're supposed to. He goes on to explain the ways the community reads the signs, the color of lake foam, the height of frog calls at dusk, the way the wind skips stones across the canal without touching them. Each tiny detail, he says, tells you whether Tlaloc is in a good mood. It's a meteorological system built entirely on vibes and an astonishing amount of frog watching. At one point, a breeze picks up and sends a few strands of incense smoke drifting sideways. The man frowns and clicks his tongue. He's sniffing, he says, nodding toward the heavens, checking to see if we're being respectful. You nod solemnly and try to look deeply reverent. Beyond the shrine, a small group of women is weaving flower garlands, bright marigolds and purple blooms you don't recognize. They lay them gently along the rows of beans and maize, speaking in low voices and occasionally pausing to laugh. One of them gestures for you to come closer and places a loop of flowers over your head. You catch a whiff of sweetness and soil, and for a moment, you imagine yourself being mistaken for an awkward local deity, probably of snacks and bad paddling. Nearby, another offering is being prepared, a handful of crushed cacao, mixed with water and a pinch of chili, swirled in a gourd. You take a sip and immediately discover why gods demand sacrifices. It's bitter, bold, and oddly electric. You cough once, and the woman who handed it to you simply says, "Good, like you passed some test." Maybe you did. As the sun shifts westward, the shrine becomes a gathering place. Children come to touch the stones for luck. Elders offer small tokens, beans, bits of cloth, folded leaves. It's not formal, not scripted, just a shared ritual built from hundreds of personal gestures layered across generations. A small girl crouches beside you and offers a damp pebble. You accept it as if it's gold. She beams. Tlaloc, it seems, doesn't need thunder and lightning to be present. He's in the stillness of the water, in the patient hands of a farmer spreading mulch, in the half-whispered Nahuatl songs rising with the smoke. He's in the rhythm of planting and the hope of harvest. As dusk begins to lean in, the air cools. A few frogs start their nightly chorus, low and uncertain at first, then bold and harmonic. The clouds above shift ever so slightly, just enough to promise a breeze but not a storm. The old man nods. He's content. You stand, dust your hands, and glance back at the tiny altar. The incense has nearly burned out, the last curl of smoke dancing upward before vanishing into the thickening blue sky. You're not sure if you believe in rain gods, but something about the way the earth softens under your feet, the way the plants lean just slightly toward the water, the way even the birds go quiet near the shrine, it makes you wonder. And then, in perfect, poetic timing, a single drop of water hits your arm. Not a drizzle, not a storm, just one drop. You look up. Tlaloc's wink. The sun is yawning its way toward the western horizon now, casting honey-colored light across the water. You take a slow stroll along a narrow reed-lined path at the Chinampas' edge, and the quiet squelch of damp earth under your feet sounds almost like a heartbeat. It's the kind of sound that belongs in lullabies, or at the very least in dreams. Then, something moves in the water, a soft ripple. too precise to be wind. You pause. Another movement. Just below the surface. A flicker of pale pink. And then, there it is again. An axolotl. Gliding effortlessly through the shallows like a lazy aquatic ghost. You crouch to watch as its feathery gills quiver with elegance. It looks up at you with that permanent Mona Lisa smile all axolotls wear. As if it knows the secret to everything but has decided not to tell you just yet. The Aztecs didn't just grow plants here. They cultivated whole micro-ecosystems, teeming with fish, amphibians, insects, birds, and even edible waterweeds. It wasn't just smart agriculture, it was a gentle kind of genius. Everything had a role, even the creatures that didn't end up in a stew. Historians still argue whether axolotls were deliberately farmed, casually tolerated, or held in some degree of reverence. One old manuscript suggests they symbolized the god Shalut, patron of twilight, misfortune, and, oddly enough, fire. A strange resume, but fitting for a creature that never quite grows up. Axolotls are what scientists call neotenic, meaning they retain juvenile features into adulthood. You, too, remember your awkward phase, but the axolotl rocks it. As you sit by the edge, more axolotls appear, drifting like little water spirits. One swims in a lazy spiral. Another hides behind a rock that's not really big enough to hide behind. They're shy but curious, and you realize you could watch them for hours. Which, frankly, is kind of the point of this place, to slow down. To notice, to marvel at small things. You hear a splash, and this time it's not gentle. A boy in a soaked tunic barrels into the water with a net. He's chasing fish, tiny silver darts that scatter like spilled coins. His mother calls from the bank, waving a woven bag and shaking her head with exaggerated disappointment. But you can tell she's smiling. The fish here, like the axolotls, aren't just background fauna. They fertilize the water, keep algae in check, and sometimes make a very tasty tamale filling. You spot a few species, a dark, lazy-bottomed catfish, some spry white minnows, and what might be the legendary carol, a minnow so abundant in Aztec times it practically threw itself into dinner. Nearby, a young girl kneels on a floating plank, reaching into the water with a gourd bowl. She scoops up a kind of soft green algae known locally as spirulina or tecuatlatl. It's thick, slimy, and smells suspiciously like a frog's armpit, but it's packed with protein. The Aztecs dried it into cakes and ate it with chili and corn, proving once again that they understood superfoods long before anyone put them in smoothies. She shows you her bowl and proudly says, "Talox cheese." You nod as solemnly as one can while looking at a bowl of swamp goop. A small wooden raft drifts past, pushed along by a very determined duck. You and the duck share a glance, both slightly alarmed to see each other there. It quacks once, judgmentally, and glides away, leaving behind a trail of ripples and vague disdain. You wander farther along the Chinampa edge and notice a narrow cut in the soil, a drainage trench, cleverly angled to allow excess water to seep back into the canal. There are stones packed along the side, lined with soft moss. This place isn't just productive, it's sustainable in the oldest, quietest sense. Nothing is wasted, everything is used. Even the moss feels like it's on payroll. You sit again, this time under a squat willow whose roots reach into the water like ancient fingers. The branches sway gently in the breeze, each leaf catching the amber light like tiny mirrors. Frogs croak in the background, and dragonflies stitch invisible patterns into the air. You close your eyes, just for a second, and feel the way the Chinampa rocks slightly under you, not from the water, but from the wind rustling the trees. It's the kind of motion that would lull a baby or convince a very tired traveler to stay a little longer. And beneath it all, the axolotls glide like quiet sentinels, watching, waiting, whispering secrets in ripples only they understand. Your legs are pleasantly sore. Your fingernails have not seen soap in hours. And the smell of wet leaves and compost is now something you associate with comfort. As the sun begins its slow, syrupy descent, you're handed a stone hoe, blunt, worn smooth, and slightly heavier than expected. You are now, apparently, on weeding duty. Your mentor in this noble task is a man who looks approximately 130 years old but moves like he's got springs in his knees. He wears a simple tunic, a broad grin, and a hat that seems permanently stuck to his head by sheer will. He speaks to you in Nahuatl. But his tone needs no translation. You're holding that hoe like it's a ceremonial flute. Here, like this. And with one smooth motion, he slides the blade just beneath the soil, lifts a weed from its roots, and flings it with practiced flair onto a growing pile. You try the same movement and, well, it's not elegant. But the weed comes up. Progress. Weeding a chinampa is like combing a giant's eyebrows. The rows are dense, meticulously spaced, and always growing something. Maize here, amaranth there, a surprise cluster of chilies further down. Every inch of soil matters. And the weeds, desperate opportunists, know this. You and the old man move slowly, hoeing and pulling, pausing occasionally to straighten your backs and mutter vague curses at stubborn root systems. A mosquito buzzes past your ear, and you swat it without even looking. You're becoming one of them, Chinampa people. Mud-scented and mosquito-tolerant. The old man tells you, with a twinkle in his eye, that a lazy gardener grows bold weeds. You nod solemnly, though you suspect he just made that up on the spot. Historians still argue whether Aztec weeding techniques were communal labor or divided by household. Some evidence suggests that families managed individual plots, while larger harvests required coordinated efforts with designated roles: seeders, planters, harvesters, and, of course, weeders, which means your current role is either sacred tradition or unpaid internship. At one point, you uncover a particularly aggressive vine that seems to have wrapped itself around 3 beanstalks, a corn husk, and the entire concept of hope. You pull, grunt, tug again, and finally wrench it free, only to fall backward into a small puddle with the grace of an off-balance donkey. The old man laughs until he wheezes. You're covered in mud. He offers no apology, just a hand up and a new nickname, Quetzalcoatl, Mudflower. You wear it with pride. You notice something else while you weed: the symmetry. Every row is straight, every plant evenly spaced. It's not by accident. There's an entire visual logic to these gardens, geometry applied with living things. The spacing prevents disease, allows airflow, and maximizes sunlight. It's like a spreadsheet made of leaves. Nearby, a woman hums while pulling weeds from her own plot. The tune rises and falls like a lullaby. Slow and repetitive, calming as tea. You recognize the rhythm: 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. Hum. Another gardener picks it up. Then another. Soon, the whole canal echoes with gentle human murmuring, like bees that found meditation. You even hum a little yourself. You're off key, of course. But nobody notices. Or they do and they're just too polite to say. At the far edge of the Chinampa, a few children collect the pulled weeds and toss them into a pile bound for the compost trench. Some weeds will dry into mulch. Others will rot down into the sludge that feeds future crops. Nothing is wasted. Even the unwanteds get a second life. You pause to sip water from a gourd handed to you by a passing auntie figure whose name you never catch. It's cool, slightly sweet, and tastes faintly of citrus and river mint. You sigh deeply and look around. The sky has softened into pastels. The Chinampas glow. Even the bugs seem to buzz more quietly, as though they, too, are easing into evening. The old man wipes his hoe clean on a bundle of grass and declares the weeds sufficiently chastised. He points toward a stack of reed mats near the canal. Time to rest, he says, in slow, deliberate Nahuatl, as if even the words are winding down. You follow him, feeling a new appreciation for every bent stalk, every fleck of soil clinging to your calves, every creak of your shoulders. You've weeded like an Aztec. You've earned your title, mud flower forever. You lower yourself onto the edge of a reed mat near a patch of resting maize, exhaling with the exaggerated relief of someone who's just spent the better part of the day arguing with weeds. The mat sighs under your weight, but doesn't complain. Neither does the small flute player seated a few paces away, lazily pressing out notes that wander through the humid evening like curious fireflies. Beyond the music, something else begins, a gentle voice, steady and lyrical, rising above the buzz of twilight insects. It's a song, soft and breathy, sung in Nahuatl by a woman tending to a row of herbs. She doesn't sing to you. She sings to her plants. The melody isn't meant for performance. It drifts like mist, wrapping around the tomato vines and brushing the squash leaves with invisible fingers. Other voices join in, not in harmony. Exactly. But in companionship, a quiet chorus rises, deep male hums, high female trills, the occasional sharp call that might be a child trying to imitate a bird or just entertaining herself with noise. Aztec gardeners often sang while they worked, not out of boredom, but reverence. Singing was a form of communication, a way to acknowledge the life in the plants, to keep rhythm, and perhaps to soothe the crops into growing straight and proud. The Nahuas believed in Tenali, an animating spirit or energy present in all living things. Songs, it was said, helped your Tenali mingle with that of your maize, your beans, your soil. Historians still debate whether certain melodies were passed down formally or improvised each season. Some songs, recorded centuries later, resemble lullabies. Others seem more like instructions sung in code: how deep to plant, how long to soak, when to shade or whisper. You pick up a fragment of a verse. Tikwal in Chichiua, not Latoli, Yoladao. You grow, little one, with my voice, my heart. It's hard not to feel something in that. You lie back, arms stretched across the mat, and listen. There are no sharp edges in this soundscape. Just layered warmth, flute, voice, frog, cricket, hush. The entire Chinampa seems to exhale with you. Beside you, a teenage boy thumps a small drum. More heartbeat than rhythm. It's not a performance. It's a kind of reminder. Keeping time with the earth's own pulse. A baby strapped to a woman's back stirs gently, sighs, and dozes again to the music of herbs and humans in harmony. In the soft light, you notice how even the plants seem to lean toward the voices. Not in the way of science, perhaps, but in the way of stories and memories and slow magic. The squash leaves flutter like they're clapping politely. A bean vine curls gently around a stick like it's listening. You remember the woman who placed a garland around your neck earlier. She's nearby again, now pressing a hand lightly to the soil as she sings. Her other hand moves rhythmically, spreading water from a gourd, drawing tiny circles in the dust. She looks completely at peace. And it's a peace that spills out across the whole garden. Over you, into your skin. You hum quietly, just one note, but it lingers, fits in, becomes part of the background. You're not a visitor anymore. You're a minor character in a long, slow-growing song. A mosquito lands on your knee. You slap at it lazily and miss. It doesn't matter. Someone begins to whistle. A tune you don't know but immediately like. It feels familiar, not because you've heard it before, but because it's the kind of tune that comes from people who know how to grow things with their hands and sing to them while they wait. The air thickens slightly with moisture, promising dew but not rain. You stretch your limbs and feel the gentle ache of honest labor settling into your muscles like warm syrup. Another voice joins in, a cracked tenor this time, and you smile without opening your eyes. The plants are singing, the people are singing, and in some small, sleepy way, you are too. The light now pools low and golden between the garden beds, sliding over the water in a sleepy shimmer. You follow your nose toward a promising aroma, a savory perfume of roasted maize, damp herbs, and something faintly sweet. Your feet guide you through the crooked paths of the Chinampas until you find a small shaded grove where a fire crackles quietly under a pile of stones. There, beneath a rough awning woven from reeds and palm fronds, sits a picnic in progress. A family has gathered, barefoot and relaxed, around a blanket made from woven cactus fiber. You're motioned over with the kind of easy welcome that leaves no room for refusal. A squat clay pot is lifted from the coals, its sides blackened, its lid wrapped in steam-soaked banana leaves. Inside, tamales, fat, soft parcels of ground corn dough wrapped around fillings you can't entirely identify but smell like joy. You're handed one, and you cradle it like a warm kitten. The wrapping peels away to reveal a swirl of chili, beans, and squash, still steaming and flecked with crushed herbs. The taste is humble, but deep. It reminds you of damp wood, salt, and something buttery that may or may not be ground pumpkin seed. There's a slight crunch you can't place, which someone tells you is toasted amaranth. You nod wisely as if you definitely already knew that. Food on the Chinampas was never elaborate. It was thoughtful. Ingredients were grown nearby, stored carefully, used creatively. The Aztecs knew how to combine flavors not with excess, but with instinct. Corn, beans, squash, yes, but also wild greens, freshwater shrimp, tiny lake fish sun-dried on stones, edible flowers, and sauces so smooth you could fall asleep mid-bite. Historians still argue about the daily diet of the average Chinampa farmer. Spanish accounts suggest a surprising variety, including dishes flavored with honey, chili, even ground cacao. Other records say meals were simple, centered around maize and pulses, with meat reserved for special occasions, or never, depending on your social rank and whether or not you were friends with a priest. A boy hands you a rolled tortilla filled with mashed avocado and something crunchy. You take a bite and discover tiny fried lake shrimp, their little legs adding an unexpected but not unpleasant texture. You shrug and keep chewing. In this setting, even mystery snacks feel comforting. Someone passes a clay cup of atole, warm, thick maize drink spiced with cinnamon and maybe an afterthought of cacao. It's creamy, slightly gritty, and tastes like a hug your grandmother might give you if she were a corn farmer with excellent seasoning instincts. You sip it slowly, the heat seeping down into your belly like coals settling under a cooking stone. Around you, conversation ebbs and flows, not urgent, not even continuous, just soft, familiar murmuring. Someone tells a story involving a duck, a basket, and a very confused fisherman. You don't catch all the words, but the laughter is contagious. Nearby, a girl sits with a bowl of roasted seeds, sorting them into piles for snacking and for saving. She offers you a few pumpkin seeds roasted with chili ash and salt. They're crunchy, a little smoky, and entirely addictive. You try to stop after 3. You fail. A gentle breeze rolls in, lifting the scent of wet leaves and firewood. The sun finally dips behind the distant tree line, leaving only a copper echo on the water. Someone lights a small dish of dried copal resin. Its smoke curls into the darkening sky, fragrant and sweetly pungent, the Aztec version of a scented candle. You lean back, full and drowsy. The earth feels warmer now. Or maybe it's just you, radiating contentment and squash-based calories. The woman beside you hands you a slice of something wrapped in a maize husk. It's a dessert, she says, sweet tamale with honey and dried cactus fruit. You take a bite and taste sugar and sun in a childhood you didn't actually have. But that somehow feels familiar. There is no music, but the rhythm of chewing, laughing, fire popping, and the occasional frog's honk blends into something more comforting than any lullaby. You lie back on the mat, eyes half-lidded, belly full, ears tuned to the soft rustle of reeds and the low croak of evening frogs. Fireflies begin to flicker above the canals, drifting lazily like tiny lanterns. One lands near your elbow and blinks twice before lifting off again. You're not in a city. You're not in a village. You're in a floating memory, built of soil and water and food passed by hand. And you're exactly where you need to be. As the final embers of the picnic fire glow faint and orange behind you, you're drawn to the edge of another Chinampa. This one is narrower, darker, more shaded by rows of young willows. Their trunks lean gently inward, forming a kind of natural hallway. At first glance, it looks like nothing special, just another stretch of planted soil flanked by reeds. But then someone hands you a torch and motions for you to look down. You kneel and touch the edge of the garden. It doesn't move. You expected it to float, to bob a little under your fingers like a raft. But it's solid, firm as land, which is strange, because this thing is definitely in the middle of a lake. The young man beside you grins and pats the earth affectionately. We tie them down, he says in slow, careful Nahuatl. Chinampas don't drift, they grow. He gestures to a row of small, leafless trees along the Chinampas border. Their roots plunge down into the lakebed like anchors. These are ahuejotes, a kind of swamp-loving willow. They don't just keep the garden in place. They stabilize the banks, draw up excess water, and give just enough shade to slow evaporation during dry spells. Historians still debate whether the practice of reinforcing the edges with tree roots was invented in the Valley of Mexico or borrowed from earlier civilizations. Some think the design mimics the natural growth of islands in shallow lakes. Others argue it was a completely deliberate innovation, an ancient answer to the question, how do we build a garden that floats but doesn't float away? You walk along the perimeter, your footsteps crunching lightly on hardened soil. The edge is reinforced with bundles of reeds tied together with thin cords made from maguey fiber. They look like sleeping mats, pressed into the earth and pinned down with sharpened stakes. Some of the stakes are old and mossy, others are clearly new. showing how repairs are constant and quiet, like trimming a living haircut. Your torch flickers and throws shadows across the lake. In the reflected light, you can see how the Chinampa fits into its surroundings, one of dozens, maybe hundreds, each laid out like puzzle pieces between dark ribbons of canal. You stop and crouch down where a narrow trench separates two plots. The water here is shallow, just ankle deep, but dark and rich with suspended nutrients. A clay pipe, sunken into the corner, quietly releases a slow trickle of water into the canal. This is controlled irrigation, gravity-fed and self-correcting. No hoses, no valves, just smart placement and good instincts. A frog watches you from the edge of the trench, sitting beside a carved stone that looks suspiciously like a face. You wonder if it's a marker, a deity, or just a forgotten ornament. The frog doesn't explain. You press your hand against the soil once more, marveling again at how steady it feels. You're standing on layers of lake muck, decomposed vegetation, and carefully arranged branches that have, over time, become a garden so permanent it feels geological. There's nothing temporary about it, nothing flimsy. This is stability built from transience, roots that hold, water that feeds, trees that tie it all together. One farmer explains, while adjusting a support beam, that the ahuejotes also offer other gifts: flexible branches for weaving, bark for medicine, shade for certain herbs that dislike full sun. You don't just plant them for the garden, she says, you plant them for everything. It's this kind of layered usefulness that defines Chinampa engineering. Nothing exists for a single purpose. The gardens aren't just gardens. They're filters, anchors, microclimates, home to fish and frogs, stage for songs, source of dinner. A Chinampa is a world. You notice a boy leading a goat along one path, not for milking or meat, but to nibble weeds from the corners. She trims, he says proudly, as the goat sniffs your hand and decides you're an interesting, a living lawnmower with attitude. There's no fence here, no gate, and yet each garden remains in place, rooted not by borders but by trust, familiarity, and the sheer entanglement of vines, roots, and human hands. You sit once more on the edge, this time letting your legs dangle just above the canal. The air smells like wet bark and nighttime flowers. You lean back onto the warm soil, one palm pressed flat against the ground. It doesn't move, and neither do you. Night has begun to settle in earnest now, brushing the sky with deep purples and charcoal blues. The Chinampas, bathed in twilight, become silhouettes, soft rectangles of green and shadow, framed by still black water. But the work isn't done yet. A low drumbeat pulses faintly in the distance, slow, even, more of a heartbeat than a call. You follow the sound, careful not to trip over any sleeping ducks or stray squash vines. As you pass one Chinampa, you notice several small fires have been lit at the corners, casting flickering light onto baskets piled high with maize, beans, and bundles of leafy greens. It's harvest night, and you're just in time to help. You join a group already in motion, gently pulling ears of corn from their stalks. Each one is handled like a gift, twisted carefully, husks peeled back slightly to check the kernels, then placed into reed baskets lined with soft grasses. The maize glows faintly gold under the torchlight, like treasure, only warmer, realer. A woman nearby picks herbs with a practiced motion, sorting them into small clay dishes, some for cooking, others for ritual, a few destined for tinctures and teas. You ask about one with soft purple leaves and she responds with a wink, for dreams. You're assigned to the bean team. Long, curving pods hang like decorations, their weight gentle in your hands as you pluck them and pile them in a woven sack that smells faintly of yesterday's rain. The soil is cool, but your body is warm now, wrapped in the rhythm of motion. Pick, inspect, place, pick, hum, place. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs used lunar phases to schedule their harvests or if seasonal cues, frog calls, air scent, the first flight of a certain kind of moth, held more weight. Some records speak of market schedules driven by astronomy. Others suggest it was just the farmer's intuition. But here, with your hands full of beans and moonlight on your cheeks, it feels like both science and poetry. You pause to watch an older man tying up bundles of chilies. He holds one up to the light, inspects the color, and mutters a soft, telematilisly, wisdom. You ask him what he means, and he simply replies, "They know when to be picked." A gentle wind rises, and the Chinampa shivers with it. The willows sway, the water stirs. Fireflies blink in and out like tiny stars caught between two worlds. You feel the moment folding in around you. A quiet turning of a page. Nearby, a girl stacks the filled baskets into a small canoe. She wraps each one with a strip of woven cloth, tucking the corners like a mother wrapping her child. She explains that the journey to market begins before dawn, and that the boat must be packed tonight. Quietly, in balance, you help her shift a few baskets until the boat sits steady. She nods, satisfied. Then, without a word, she places a sprig of basil and a clay bead near the bow, a small offering for a smooth journey. Your muscles ache, but it's a good ache. The kind that follows real work. The kind you'll feel in the morning and remember with a sleepy smile. You stretch your arms overhead and look up. The sky is open now, fully dark and dazzling. Stars scatter themselves across the black like spilled grain. The constellations feel oddly closer out here, clearer without the clutter of torchlight or temple fire. Someone points to a bright, steady glow low in the east. That one is for planting, they say. She watches. You don't ask who she is. You just believe it. Of course there's a star for planting. There's probably one for weeding, singing, and falling asleep in your dinner, too. As the harvest winds down, laughter rolls across the water. Someone slips into a song, half a chant, half a melody, and others hum along. You don't know the words, but you follow the tune, letting it fold over you like a warm blanket. And then, just as the last corn cob is stacked, the final torch doused, the night fully stretched, a frog croaks somewhere near your feet. It's not elegant, it's not musical, but it's perfect. Everyone laughs, and you do too, your voice rising into the night air, carried out over the Chinampas and up into the stars. You close your eyes for a moment, just to rest them. The harvest is done, and you are full of tamales, of twilight, of something deeper than food. The night is still young, but the gardens are asleep. The Chinampas lie quiet beneath the stars, their rows of maize and amaranth whispering only when the breeze demands it. But down a wide, gently curving canal, something stirs. You hear it first, wooden paddles slapping softly against water, the creak of reed baskets shifting, the distant murmur of sleepy conversation. Then you see them, trade canoes, dozens of them, sliding silently across the black water like drifting constellations, each one piled with the day's harvest, carefully balanced, their paddlers standing upright in the stern like sleepy gondoliers. The market at Tlatelolco opens before sunrise, and timing is everything. You blink, and a canoe glides by close enough for you to reach out and touch. A woman near the bow waves. Her boat smells like epazote, marigold, and very ripe tomatoes. Another canoe follows, this one piled high with squash so large they look smug. Two men argue in low tones about whether theirs is the longest. You decide not to weigh in. You're invited to join a crew. Naturally, you don't know how to paddle with precision, but you nod confidently and clamber aboard. The canoe dips, sighs, then adjusts to your weight with the patience of someone who's used to amateurs. Your companion, a man with arms like braided rope and a voice like a lullaby, hands you a paddle. Slow, smooth, don't splash the onions. You do your best. The canals are wider here, more open, with the moonlight pooling across the surface like spilled milk. It's eerily quiet except for the swish of paddles and the occasional squawk of a bird disturbed by this nocturnal parade. Historians still debate how organized this trade network truly was. Some believe the Chinampa farmers worked in structured guilds, with scheduled deliveries in pre-approved stalls in the capital's bustling markets. Others suggest a more informal flow, neighbors bartering over who grew the best chilies or which reed mat maker was secretly adding extra reeds. What's undeniable is that this floating commute is as essential as the soil itself. The city of Tenochtitlan, with its tens of thousands of hungry mouths, depends on this gentle, moonlit migration of maize and melons. As your canoe drifts forward, the man next to you tells you about last month's squash growing contest. Mine grew so wide, he says, I had to paddle around it. You raise your eyebrows in admiration. He nods solemnly, then adds, it tasted like socks, though. Another canoe drifts close, and for a moment, you paddle alongside a girl no older than 10. balancing a crate of flowers in her lap with regal seriousness. Morning trade gets the best coin, she tells you, but night trade gets the best breeze. She is clearly the CEO of Marigold Logistics, and you are lucky to share a canal with her. Somewhere up ahead, a man sings softly, not to entertain, but to pass time. His voice carries easily across the still water. A low, rhythmic chant that seems designed to keep everyone awake just enough to avoid a canoe pile-up. You join in, if only with a hummed harmony. The canal narrows again, and the boats slow to avoid a bend. You pass beneath an arching willow, its branches brushing the surface, dripping silver in the moonlight. Fireflies scatter in the tree's wake like sparks from a slow-burning flame. The crates creak behind you, heavy with beans and tomatoes. Your paddle slips into the water again and again, guided now by instinct rather than aim. You feel the boat respond to you. Not perfectly, but cooperatively, as if it appreciates your effort. You glance back at the line of canoes following yours, each lit softly by the moon, each piled high with the results of a day's labor and a night's patience. This is not a commute. It's a procession. Your arms begin to tire, but the air is cool and forgiving. The man beside you whistles a slow tune between breaths. You echo the notes, and he laughs. That's the song of the lazy oar, he says, but it'll do. The lights of the city are beginning to glimmer on the far horizon. Tiny dots that promise trade, coin, and perhaps, if the gods are kind, some sweet tamales for breakfast. You paddle onward, crickets sing, the crates don't tip, and the onions remain perfectly dry. You return to the Chinampa just before dawn. The sky a pale lavender rinsed with streaks of apricot. Your arms buzz with the low, pleasant fatigue of honest labor, and your hands carry the faint scent of lakewater and squash. As you step off the canoe, your feet find solid earth again, spongy and familiar. The floating garden welcomes you back without ceremony, as if you'd only wandered off for a minute. But you haven't come back to sleep. Not yet. There's one more job to witness before the day begins anew. A farmer beckons you toward a reed shelter at the edge of the garden, where a group has gathered around a bark paper calendar, thin, tattered, and marked with symbols you can barely decipher. A few dots, a curl, a handprint, a jaguar paw? They're plotting the next cycle of planting. Aztec agriculture wasn't just a matter of soil and sunshine. It was guided by the stars, the gods, the shape of the moon, and the quiet urgings of fish bones cast like dice. Tonight, it's a full rotation of Venus, which apparently means it's time to rotate the chilies, repot the herbs, and maybe not speak too loudly near the cilantro. You sit cross-legged beside a boy who is very serious about a bundle of dried lizard tails. He drops them onto a woven mat, reads their arrangement like tea leaves, and solemnly declares that the amaranth should be planted 3 rows to the left this time. Everyone nods. Historians still debate the practicality versus the symbolism in these rituals. Were they meant to appease the gods, or to coordinate labor in a society too vast to manage by pure logic? Were the stars just a calendar, or something more intimate, a language between the soil and sky, only spoken by those who kneel close enough to listen? You don't know, but when the old woman draws a line in the dirt with her finger, dividing corn from beans from squash with geometric precision, you feel the sense of a cosmic choreography. Someone brings out a bowl of dried maize kernels, deep red, bright yellow, some almost black. These are not just seeds. They are promises, each color planted at a specific depth, in a specific spot, with a specific blessing whispered over it. You're handed a few and shown how to press them gently into the soil, using the pad of your thumb like you're tucking in a sleeping child. Your hands are clumsy, but the gesture feels right, sacred, even. Next comes the turn of the ash. From a small clay dish, someone sprinkles powdered charcoal across part of the bed, not to ward off evil spirits, though that's a nice bonus, but to enrich the soil with minerals, reduce acidity, and deter pests. Every scoop is measured, though no one holds a scale. Then there's the planting song, quieter this time, slower, like a whispered recipe shared between friends. Each syllable carries the memory of seasons past. Each note is a nudge for the seeds to remember what they are meant to become. You glance to the side and see a child carefully placing feathers along the row ends, short, striped ones from ducks and long, elegant ones from herons. They're not ornamental, they're markers, Feathers mean maize, stones mean beans, sticks wrapped with fiber? Squash. A language without letters, readable only to those with dirt under their nails. As the final seeds are pressed into the chinampa, someone marks the edge with a chalky white shell. A moon offering. Tomorrow is a good day for roots. They say, the moon will pull them downward. Deep and strong. You sit back on your heels, brushing your hands clean on your tunic, which by now is more soiled than fabric. The planting is done. The planting is done. The ritual is complete. But no one hurries off. Instead, the group lingers in quiet satisfaction, sipping hot drinks and watching the light strengthen across the lake. The water glows faintly pink. Birds begin their tentative morning calls. Somewhere nearby, a duck falls off a log with a disgruntled splash. No one moves to help it. It's done this before. Someone nudges your shoulder and points skyward. Venus. Bright, unwavering, glinting just above the horizon. You don't need to ask what it means. You just watch. And you understand, not in words, but in roots. The sun finally crests the low spine of distant hills. And the lake answers in gold. The chinampas shimmer with dew. Every blade of grass tipped in light. Every canal catching the day's first breath. You sit on the edge of a garden bed, legs swinging lazily over the side, and let yourself melt into the rhythm of the morning. The air is filled with soft rustles, the flap of heron wings overhead, the stretch of tree branches, the first gentle creaks of baskets being lifted for breakfast preparation. Somewhere, water is being scooped into a clay pot, its surface broken by a single drop falling with the precision of a poem. But you are still. For now, a woman offers you a reed mat, freshly unrolled. You accept it with a thankful nod, finding a spot under a tree whose leaves whisper in a tongue that seems just shy of human. You lay the mat out beside a small patch of sunflowers, already turning their drowsy faces to the light. Lying down feels inevitable. The mat smells faintly of lake water, ash, and crushed herbs, like the memory of all the days that have passed on this floating plot of land. You nestle into it, your fingers trailing over the mat's frayed edges, your feet still tingling from the chill of early canal water. Above you, the sky is streaked with pale blue and gentle white. No drama. No declarations. Just sky. A quiet kind of forever. The chinampa moves. Not much. Just a barely perceptible sway as a breeze passes across the lake. But it's enough to make your body feel like it's in a cradle. Rocked by water. Held by earth. Lulled by the ancient breath of reeds and roots. You remember every part of your journey here. The seed sorting. The soil pressing. The songs. The laughter. The tiny lizard tail omens. It all adds up to something more than agriculture. Something closer to lullaby. Historians still debate whether chinampa farming was a chore or a calling. Whether it fed empires or simply let families sleep with full bellies and calm hearts. But the people who lived it didn't worry about footnotes or legacy. They planted, they weeded, they harvested, they sang. And now, they sleep. So do you. Your eyes grow heavy as the garden rocks beneath you. You hear someone humming nearby. It's a tune you heard once before, at dusk, during the weeding, but now it's slower, softer, like the chinampa is singing you to sleep. The last thing you feel is warm sunlight across your legs, a reed mat curled against your back, and the deep, soothing knowledge that nothing here is ever truly lost. Not a seed, not a story, not a dream. And now, the garden fades. The reeds whisper more quietly. The birds shift into silence. The water stills. You feel yourself becoming part of this place, not as a visitor, not even as a farmer, but as something simpler. A breath, a breeze, a piece of the garden's memory. The mat beneath you is warm, softened by sun and story. It no longer needs to hold your weight, it holds your rest. The edges blur. The ground hums faintly, like it's sighing beneath you. Your arms are light now. Your fingers empty of work. The soil has released you. Above, clouds drift slowly across the sky, stretched thin like linen left to dry. They are slow, so slow, and you feel yourself matching their pace. The water laps in time with your breath. Inhale, ripple, exhale, stillness. The garden no longer rocks. It carries. The scent of the lake fades into memory. The hum of distant voices dims to the softest murmur, then vanishes altogether. Only your breath remains. Only the warmth. Only the quiet. You are floating now, not on a chinampa, not on a mat, but in something gentler, something that holds you without asking anything in return. Let go of the garden. Let go of the lake. Let go of the sun. They'll still be here when you wake. But for now, drift and sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.